and the Kate conspiracies abound. She apparently has tweeted, and she blames herself for this Photoshopped photo that has been now killed by some of the major British and worldwide media agencies. But how can we really believe that she sent that tweet in the first place? You see, the trust has been broken between the public and the British royal family, and that's what is at the centre of all of this. Joining me live now is British historian and writer Tessa Dunlop. Tessa, thanks so much for your time. Great to see you. Oh, what is behind this? I mean, why would they send a Photoshop photo in the first place? That's what everyone's wondering.
Well, I don't go with the conspiracy theorists. You know, I don't believe, we know she isn't in a coma. She was today spotted inside a car that dropped William at the Commonwealth Service. Incidentally, please note that didn't get any coverage in Westminster today. But certainly something's awry. I wonder if it wasn't maybe, I mean, this is pure speculation on my part, but I believe it was something quite serious. Otherwise, why wouldn't the palace have just put out into the public domain the original undoctored photograph and said, look, I thought I could improve it with a little bit of airbrushing here and there, but here's the original. They didn't do that. And in not doing that, they further stoked or fueled the fires of conspiracy and cynicism. And it makes me think, you know, we know she's post-operative. We know she's been unwell, had a major health blow, and therefore perhaps maybe wanted to use an old photo where she looked a bit more rosy and what she thinks is more her normal self. Is that speculation on my part? Either way, by trying to control the narrative, they've lost control of the news agenda entirely. And it's interesting, Laura, that, and she referred to this today in her apology tweet, where she refers to herself as an amateur photographer. Why? Why did Kate's main hobby become photography? Well, again, it was another way of the royal family trying to exert some control. You can have pictures of my children if I take them. Of course, now she is the subject of all this media interest. Who takes the photo? I mean, if you look at that shot, and my first reaction when I saw it yesterday was, wow, not only is William a future king, but he's also an incredible photographer. I mean, it did look too good to be true. If you've got children, you know, to get everyone saying cheese and looking delightful and framed beautifully, very, very hard if you're busy Prince Dad. Unlikely.
I'm spot on, Tessa. And do you really believe that she'd just been, you know, noodling around with a Photoshop application on her laptop in that beautiful garden? I mean, I'd believe her if she said she used an Instagram filter, but this is much more than that.
It is, which is why the photograph was killed. I mean, we do know that previously she's done a bit of slightly dodgy or awkward photoshopping. You remember Louis turned up in a Christmas photograph minus a finger and such like. So that isn't inconceivable. But what is weird is that to quash the speculation, they haven't just released the original photograph. And that does beg additional questions, which is why I'm wondering if in a totally understandable way, she thought, actually, you know, I don't want to look post-operative. I want to look back to my normal self. And therefore, there was a bit of sleight of hand there. And the problem is now by the doubling down that we've had from the palace and really the extraordinarily clumsy narrative that they've been leading, because lest we forget, Kate's on sick leave. Quite why she was the one that had to take the flak for this photograph that she didn't snap anyway. I mean, it's in William's name. I don't really understand. My hunch was maybe the palace's thinking was they'll come less hard down on Kate, therefore she should front up and own it, as opposed to William or the suits, those notorious suits that Harry always went on about. But either way, they've lost control of the narrative, and they've also, as you mentioned, alluded to, they've lost public trust. And the whole point of the royal family, certainly here in Britain, or one of the points, beyond this ridiculous fairy tale soap opera, is that they are meant to be above grubby politics, and we've certainly had a lot of grubby politics here in Britain over the last few years. And what the late Queen embodied so brilliantly and singularly was this idea of something being exemplary and above the fray. And by chipping away at our trust, because you'll remember there were questions, cash for questions, and dodgy stuff around the king, and then there's Andrew and all his sagas. But Kate and William always seemed fresh of face, thoroughly decent, very honest. And now there is this big question mark over their integrity, which is deeply unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the internet has been serving up some pretty hilarious takes on all of this. I saw one that, said, Prince Andrew now claiming it was Kate who photoshopped that photo of him, in that Caribbean island. But more seriously, I mean, if we take ourselves back a couple of weeks ago, and this is a good example for an Australian audience here, there was a photo of Kate and her mum off to a doctor's appointment. Yeah. I think she was coming out of Adelaide Cottage. And then the British press, as I understand it, didn't widely publish that photo at all because there's this understanding between the British press and the royal family. That was not an officially released photo, and the British press respected that. Now they've released this doctored photo. Is that, a chord shattered, do you think?
Well, there is this very curious, on the one hand, super deferential behaviour around the royal family, because it's all about access. And the royal press pack attached to each press organisation and tabloid wants the best access. At the same time as they will also attack when they feel let down. Like today, the press are on the attack. They're like, we respected you, we gave you space, and now you've taken us for fools. And that's what it feels like. There's a great dollop of entitlement about the way that King William and their advisors, bear in mind they have a legion of employees paid for out of the public purse, out of the sovereign grant, this idea that they could just take us for fools, that they could pull the wool over our eyes. But I think beyond this media frenzy, Laura, which will run on, it's like a wave motion, you know how it works. Something else will pop up, we'll briefly forget. But actually, there is a greater existential crisis for the royal family going on right now. That fault line, when the baton shifts from one monarch to another, is always a weak point. Doesn't matter what century you look at, that is always a danger point. We knew there would be problems moving from the incredibly impressive, hugely popular late Queen to Charles, but I don't think we expected the chickens to come home so quickly. We've got a king with an unnamed cancer. We've got the lightning rod, the glamour, the grace and the beauty of the future royal family, i.e. Kate Middleton, because that's all we've got now, out of action with an unnamed illness, shying away. She was caught briefly in the car today, turning her face away from the press. And this woman who seemingly lent into being a royal, who actively chose it because she chose to marry William. She'd been in Britain, she'd been in the boarding school system, she knew what it involved, and she seemed to be leading really quite brilliantly and taking over, this new guard. Now it appears that she's taken a bit of time off, she's feeling vulnerable, and a bit like workers who never returned from COVID. Maybe, who knows, and this is again speculation on my part, is she sitting there thinking, what was I doing glad handing on that crazy roundabout? A sense that perhaps she doesn't want the gig as much as she once did. And can you blame her, Laura?
No, you cannot. So that's what the speculation is among royal historians like yourself, royal reporters, that perhaps there is something more serious going on here, not just with her physical health?
There's also all what I call below the line, all the trolling and stuff about the tensions in their relationship. Certainly the body language wasn't great in the car. And again, it would take an extraordinary bomb-proof couple to be managing this without any tension. Yeah. It's incredibly high stakes. And I think what we forget, one of the most essential ingredients for successful monarchy is good health. Now, the Queen and Philip had that in abundance. They got minor niggles in extreme old age, by which time they had a whole team of children and adult grandchildren to come in behind them. But suddenly we've got our two main players, the King, because Charles wanted that job, and Kate, who we actively married into that job, both out of action. And we're left with the reluctant Camilla, hardly a pin-up, and the reluctant William. William's always been a bit of a reluctant royal. It was Harry who had the charisma and seemed to quite enjoy the foray and the chat. And actually, William, who from a teenage boy onwards, really appeared ambivalent. And when he was asked, I think you'll remember in his 21st birthday, if he wanted to become king, he was like, it's my duty. It's not about wanting it. So this is a guy who's had a checkered relationship with his destiny. And now he is standing alongside his stepmother. And I don't think this is what anybody anticipated. And of course, there are glaring omissions in the picture. Oh, but for the grace of God, had things gone differently, we would have a super glamorous queen right now, still looking great in her 60s, called Diana. Had we handled things differently, had the whole situation taken a different turn, we would also have Meghan and Harry in the fray. So no wonder Kate is thinking or feeling vulnerable and perhaps wanting to hide behind a bit of photo doctoring. I mean, again, she's human. And that's the other thing about our relationship with this royal family. Yeah, they're an institution of state, but we treat them like they're not real, like they're a fairy story. And we forget that beneath the edifice, there are these human beings. And that makes it really quite sinister.
It certainly does, Tessa. It's always good to talk to you. It's been too long between drinks for us. We'll see you soon.